Hi everybody, I'm Trish Robertson and I'm from the Bearsden Festival, and we are delighted that clinical psychologists Doctors Joe McColl, Jan Ferris and Catherine Jenkins agreed to partner up with us this year for the Green Shoots programme. And we thought this was a good opportunity to gather as a community to think about the year that we've had and take away some advice and some tips about how to keep ourselves well as we're coming out of this phase of the pandemic. So without anything further to say at the moment, I'm going to hand over to Joe, Jan and Catherine. Thanks, girls.
Thanks, Trish, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Jo, and we've got Jan and Catherine. We are so pleased that we were asked to come along here tonight just to talk about kind of lockdown and the COVID and how it's impacted everybody and how we're gradually starting to move out of that. So I don't know if you are aware of who we are or where we work, but we are in a place called the Wellbeing Rooms, which is above Massimo. So I'm assuming you might all know where that is if you're living in Bearsden. So we opened up in February 2020, timed it absolutely perfectly for a pandemic to come along and lock us down the next month. So yeah, that was a bit challenging. So I guess we're within this journey with everybody about the challenges that we've had kind of both personally and professionally and so on. So one of the reasons why we opened up the Wellbeing Rooms was just really we're all very passionate about bringing mental health to the high street. There's not really much around in terms of, you know, places where you can go, you know, privately and to have that accessible. So we opened up and we're trying to just kind of spread the word really about, you know, promoting good mental health and so on. So tonight we're going to be talking about a number of things. Hopefully there'll be things that you can take away and kind of, you know, make you think about things and actually put into practice. But bear in mind, you know, often we'll talk about this sort of stuff over a long period of time with our clients. So it's just a wee bit of a flavour. But we've got a question and answer session at the end. So please chip in if you've got any questions. So over to Jan, who's got a few housekeeping things that she's going to talk about.
Hi, I'm Jan. I bet everybody coming to a webinar thought that they wouldn't have to do housekeeping. Who knew you have to do housekeeping when you're on Zoom? It turns out that you do. Of course, if we were to meet in person, we would have had brownies and scones and hot tea and coffee. So I hope you've all got your digestives ready. This webinar is being recorded, so if you are comfortable with that, you can, you know, choose to whether you want your camera on or off. That's entirely up to you. We ask that everybody please put their mute buttons on. It just helps with interference so that we don't kind of get too much feedback and, you know, everybody can hear. Yeah, everybody can hear well. We are welcoming questions, but what we would ask is if people we're going to have questions at the end, but if people can put any specific questions in the chat, then we'll be more than happy to pick up on that as we go. But as I say, we'll probably keep them to the end of there's a 15-minute kind of question and answer at the very end. We're more than happy to take your questions. In saying that, this is a public forum, so we would ask that anything that's confidential or anything that's personally sensitive is kept. You know, we can't ensure confidentiality, so we would ask that that's kept. We're more than happy to be contacted, but maybe if there's anything too personal, to keep it for a kind of more private forum. Similarly, we'll be talking about COVID, we'll be talking about the last year. So if there's anything that causes distress, you know, if we're talking about worrying, that creates distress for you, we ask that you look after yourself and do what you normally do to kind of make yourself feel a bit kind of calmer or a bit safer. I think that's everything with regards to housekeeping, in case unless I've missed anything. No doubt I'll come back. But yeah, that's it for housekeeping. We don't need to do fire exits. I'm hoping we get those up. So I'm going to pass over to Catherine now, who's going to outline what we're talking about this evening.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah, hello everybody, I'm Catherine, and it's just so lovely to see so many people come to join us tonight. Really what we're going to do is a brief spell each with a topic each. And those topics, we asked the community, what would you like to hear more about? What would you like some information on? What would be helpful? So thank you to everybody who answered the polls, and the ones that were of most interest to the people of Bearsden and Mulgai and surrounding areas, where the first one was about worrying and what to do about worrying, particularly about things that are out with our control, as we've had ample experience of this last year. And the next one was about doing what matters. How can you keep on doing things that are important even when you're in the midst of something really, really difficult? And the third one was about how can we get help, and how do you know when you need to get help professionally, and where on earth do you go to get that? So what we're going to do is we're going to chunk it down a little bit, where each of us are going to take a section, but we're actually going to keep it quite kind of chatty and interactive as well, so that it's less boring. We're not just talking at you, we're talking to each other as well and having a bit of a conversation about it. Hopefully that'll be less dull. So I'm going to be first talking about worrying, and then it's going to be Jan talking about doing what matters, and then after that it's going to be Jo talking about how do you go about getting help then. So as Jan said and Jo said, we will have time for question and answer at the end, but please do put questions as we go along in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that and kind of drawing themes together at the end. And we'll have a probably just maybe over the 10 minutes each talking, and then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end for questions. My maths isn't very strong. I'm sure it'll probably be a bit longer than that. I wanted to say 15 minutes each, but it's probably not, because we've had an introduction, we've had housekeeping, so somewhere in the region of 12 minutes maybe each. Okay. About that. So I think first of all then it's me to kind of talk about worrying. And you'll have seen that in the run up to this, we've created some blogs and we've created some vlogs, which was very new to us because none of us are tech savvy, and this seems to be a whole new world of vlogging. But in terms of providing information at a systemic level, being able to kind of share knowledge with people, that seems to be a really good way to do it. So some of you might have seen those already and some of you might not, but they're all online on our website, which we can give you details of later. And I know the Bearsden Festival has been sharing them widely as well. The first thing to say about worrying, and the question was, what can I do about worrying? What on earth can I do? And really, I think it's such a human thing to worry. People get worried about worrying, and we all kind of go, oh, I'm so worried about this. And then you have a whole other level of worrying about worrying as well. But worrying is actually incredibly normal. Our brains are actually designed to look out and seek out threat and to seek out danger, so that it can keep us safe and it can keep us alive. It's just a kind of main evolutionary thing. It's really important. So you could almost say we're wired to worry, and our brains are always going to seek out new things to worry about. What is really kind of very unfunny really is, I think we all probably had enough to worry about before COVID came along. We had our normal worries, never mind then adding on a whole other level of having a global pandemic. So everyone's experiences over the last year would have been with all your normal things that go on that we worry about, and plus on top of that, all the worries and stresses around COVID, which would be to do with, families not being able to see people, health and well-being, worries about contracting COVID, what that's going to mean, and also worries about jobs, whether you're furloughed or whether you were a key worker and had to work. We've all had lots of different kinds of worries as well. And then actually, we've all been hearing, as things have progressed and changed, about new kinds of worries as we've moved on through the pandemic. And the worries at the moment that we're hearing a lot about are things like, right, okay, well, now things are opening up. What's that going to be like? Is that going to be a good thing? Am I actually feeling quite socially anxious about going into situations that used to be normal for me, but it's actually really busy in Buchanan Street? Myself, I was in Buchanan Street last week for something, and it was a very overwhelming experience, and it surprised me. I was surprised by the physiological experience of anxiety that surged through me and how strong and powerful that was. So I think we can have in advance ideas about what might be worrying, but then some things can catch us out as well, and we kind of didn't realise that we would worry about it. And Jo and Jan and I have been hearing lots of different kinds of worries. For instance, about one of the key things that I'm hearing a lot at the moment is about catching up. So it's oh no, that, you know, with work I've got so much to catch up on. We hear that in the NHS as well with waiting lists, but the pressure that people are under, people waiting for health procedures, but also people who are trying to provide those health procedures and the pressures to provide that. And also about schools and people, parents saying to us, well, my child's going back to school and they've only got this amount of time and they've got exams coming up, and how are they meant to catch up on that? And they're maybe really full with worry already anyway. So those are some of the worries that I've been hearing about recently. And Jo and Jan, I think you were going to say a wee bit about some of the worries you've been hearing as well.
Yeah, linking into the school worries, you know, it's interesting to hear from the children's perspective as well about what they're worrying about, you know, and it's partly to do with kind of being back in the classroom and things. But what can often be really important to, you know, a young child is, am I going to have my transition days going to high school? Is there going to be a football match at the end? Am I going to go to the time capsule? Because that's what you normally do, you know, when you have the end of school, you know, where's all this kind of school trips? You know, just all the sports day, for example, that's completely changed. And these, from a little child's point of view, are the big things too. So parents are kind of worrying about, you know, schoolwork and, you know, do they need to catch up, or has everybody kind of had a different experience? And sometimes from a child's perspective, it can feel a wee bit different. And I've also been hearing from a lot of people about just the significant changes in their workplace. A lot of places aren't going back to what they were. So sometimes people did actually like the routine of the commute, you know, the journey going to work, preparing in their head what it's going to be like, the journey home to wind down, but also the social aspect of being in the office, the banter and the chat and the cup of tea. You know, I've been hearing from quite a few people who are quite at a significant loss because, you know, they don't have that anymore. So it's these things, I think, that are now a little bit different to the worries of last year when we were all at home. So I think it's important really to really validate all of those worries, you know, that they're very significant and real. And sometimes it doesn't take much of a change to kind of make people feel like they're, you know, it's just all a bit too much. Don't know if Jan's kind of heard some experiences.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about this webinar, we were talking about how everyone's story is different. We've all got different types of worries, but we've actually got very shared experiences that this has been a period of kind of increased anxiety and increased worry for us all. And we might experience worry quite differently. For some people, they worry about lots of things all of the time. But some people have an almost, when they feel full, when their capacity is overwhelming, they become quite tunnel visioned on one particular type of worry. I remember last year, you know, I was talking to a friend actually, and she became very, very worried about the nutritional content of our meals and our menu planning. And you could see she was just full. That's what was happening for her. She was overwhelmed, but it became like a tunnel vision. And it was like, you know, I almost can't cope with everything else. So I'll just think about one thing. But actually that was a form of worry. And it just became very kind of all consuming for her. And so we see different types of presentations of worry, whether it's lots of different things or one overwhelming thing that if you weren't full, you would cope with really, really well, and you know, it would be okay. But just now our capacity to cope has reduced, and so, you know, it's thinking of what we can then do to try and manage that capacity and that capacity change, which is, I think, what Catherine's going to talk about now.
Yeah, thanks, Jo and Jan. And I think like both of you, they're talking about capacity, and I guess we've got this, there's quite a good visual image that we use. We should maybe try and put that on our website as well, of a cup. It's a lovely illustration. It's been drawn by another psychologist. She's called The Psychology Mum, that's her handle. And she has this image of a cup and loads of different stuff in the cup, so that you can see it's so full, it's actually brimming over the top. And then, in fact, it can be just a very small thing like spilling the milk, or, you know, losing the house keys, or whatever it is. It's the tiny thing that comes in and just everything just spills out over the cup. So this idea of being full is very much prevalent for all of us, I think. And that idea of, you know, you kind of almost have to take some stuff out before you've got any room for anything else. So yeah, in terms of what we can do about worry and worrying about things that are out with our control, because lots of these things are out with our control. And as Jan's point was there, sometimes we can almost pick something that we can then control, and we can really focus on that. And sometimes that can be helpful, and sometimes it can get to a level where that's maybe unhelpful and it interferes with our lives and it becomes problematic. So trying to think about ways that we can manage with worry and manage with these situations. One of the key things is noticing what you can control. So if there are things physically that you can control, so like with COVID, there's restrictions, there's guidelines, we can wear face coverings, we can socially distance, we can follow the rules. Those are things that are within our control. So there's usually an element, even if something feels completely out of control, there's usually an element about it that maybe we have got a bit of control over. So that's the first thing. The second thing feels like a small one, but it's actually quite a big one. And that's about just being really kind to yourself, because actually worrying is really exhausting. It can derail your life. You can get so caught up, and our brains can be so busy trying to keep us safe by worrying that it actually just takes over, and it can stop us from concentrating, it can stop us from sleeping, it can stop us from being able to engage in what's going on in our lives. It can be really, really wearing and really horrible. So actually to just be really kind to yourself and to notice and to recognize that this is something that is a human thing that we all do. It's really normal. It's a completely understandable response, that your brain is trying to be helpful. It's trying to keep you safe, but maybe just now it's a wee bit in overdrive. It's gone on red alert, and it maybe could come down to amber even. So you actually just being really kind and compassionate and recognizing that, and talking to yourself in a nice way. So saying, right, okay, thanks for that, brain, thanks for trying to keep me safe, but actually it's not helping me just now to really worry and to focus on this and for this to really distract me. So that kindness is something that's really important. And talking to ourselves like you would to a friend, that's a really key thing that lots of people find quite almost a surprise at first, to realise how you talk to yourself inside. And if you actually start to catch how you really do talk to yourself, you might notice that sometimes you're quite harsh, or you can be quite critical. And so just noticing that and thinking, oh, wow, would I say that to my good friend? Would I speak in that tone? Would I actually say those words? And quite often you'll find the answer is no, I really wouldn't, because that would be quite hurtful. Maybe that would be quite not nice. So actually just beginning to start thinking, well, okay, if I'm talking to myself like that, how's that going to make me feel gradually over time? Not that great. Could I maybe work on that? Could I maybe start to talk to myself a bit more gently, or a bit more like I'm a friend? So that's another really helpful tip that we find is quite useful. The other thing that we use a lot is this brilliant technique called dropping anchor, and Jo is going to lead us through that technique and that exercise. So I'll hand over to Jo for dropping anchor.
I'm going to drop anchor whilst I do this exercise. So this is a kind of experiential exercise. So if you want to try it, then that would be great. But we've also this screen that Sam's kindly put on Zoom at the moment. We'll share that later on. So, you know, don't worry if you kind of can't follow it too well at the moment. You can try it in your own time as well. But this technique is a very accessible, easy to use technique that you can tune into at any time, and we use this a lot with our clients, and it can be helpful for numerous things like dealing with flashbacks, or dealing with kind of overwhelming thoughts or panic attacks, or just feeling kind of overwhelmed with anxiety.
Being worried about running a webinar.
Exactly, we've been dropping anchors all over the place all week.
Dropped a lot of anchors today.
I know. So the name comes from a kind of visual image that can be really quite helpful to have in your mind. So if you imagine you're on a boat, okay, and you're in a harbour, and there's an awful storm brewing and you're in the boat and the waves are crashing all over the place and you're holding on for dear life and there's this thunder and lightning everywhere. In order to keep that boat safe and steady, you would throw the anchor over the edge, drop that anchor, it digs into the seabed and it holds that boat steady. It doesn't make the storm suddenly stop, storm's still going, but you know that you're not going to get pulled out into the sea. You know that, okay, still a bit rocky, but you're steadier. So dropping anchor is a little bit like how to deal with an emotional storm. And we all get these emotional storms from time to time. Sometimes it can just feel really overwhelming. So what to do then is a number of strategies, and there's a really easy kind of way to remember, and it's the word ACE. So it's not on this thing that's up at the moment, but it'll be on the kind of PDF we'll share later. So the A in ACE stands for acknowledge what's going on. So it's actually naming what is in your mind, naming and acknowledging, noticing the emotions that are that you're noticing, naming the kind of memories that you might have. So you're actually trying to contain it in a way by saying, I'm noticing I'm feeling really anxious. I'm noticing I'm feeling really sad. So you're just kind of trying to contain that and acknowledge it. The C then stands for connect with your body. So you're connecting with your body and you're coming back into your body, okay? So what that means is sometimes you get caught up in your thoughts and your memories and your sensations. And the connecting with your body is just a way to kind of bring yourself back to the here and now. So you can try this just now. So you can just push your feet into the floor if you're sitting somewhere, and notice your toes pushing into the floor. Just kind of do some stretches, you know, you can stretch and just kind of notice what that feels like in your body. You can take a deep breath from your diaphragm. So just sometimes one deep breath can be really helpful just to kind of bring things down a bit. Sometimes pushing your hands together can be really helpful just to kind of connect with your body. And then the E stands for explore and engage with your surroundings. And this bit's really helpful because you're tuning into what's around about you in the here and now. So you're trying to connect with the present moment instead of your mind pulling you into the future or pulling you into something from the past. And to do that, it's about tuning into your 5 senses. So it's about, for example, name 5 things you can see. So you can do that just now. Have a look around your room. What can you see? So from my view here, I can see some pens, a mug, a picture, a door, a plant. So I'm connecting with what's in front of me. Then name 4 things you can hear. So I can hear not that much. I can hear traffic outside. I can hear somebody having a wee giggle there. But it's quite quiet, but it doesn't matter if you can't find 4 things. The main thing's about tuning into your surroundings. And then 3 things you can touch. So I can feel the desk in front of me, it's quite smooth. My chair's a bit rougher. I can feel the texture. So you're really kind of tuning into that. I can feel my glass that's cool. It's got water in it, so it's quite cool to the touch. And then maybe 2 things that you can smell. There's not much here at the moment, and 1 thing you can taste. It doesn't have to necessarily be in that order, but the main thing is that, you know, you're tuning into what's in front of you and having that in mind. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we often say. So 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. And that can often just center people. And we use this technique all the time really with clients, and actually you can see them visibly just kind of come down a bit when they're in session doing that. So it's something that takes a bit of time to practice, just like anything, you know. It'll take a wee bit of time just to kind of get going with that. So practicing it even when you're not feeling particularly overwhelmed. So when things do get tough, it might come a bit more naturally to you. So hopefully that's something you can take away from tonight to try. And in our blog, we speak about that a little bit more.
Thank you, Jo, and thanks for sharing this slide. That's great. So yeah, that will be available so that you can kind of look at it again, but hopefully some of you might have tried that along with Jo. And I did, and it certainly helped me because we've all been worrying about doing this and what it's going to be like because it's not our forte. but actually it just really helps coming back into your body and kind of centering. So that was helpful for me. Thanks, Jo. And I think that some of these things that we're talking about, they might seem simple, they might seem small, or you might think, gosh, that seems like quite a lot. However you take it, I hope that you can revisit it at a later date if you think it could be helpful at all for you with managing worry. That's the first section of our webinar about worrying. And the next section is going to be a wee change because it's about doing what matters. And Jan is going to talk to us about that.
So again, the community poll has asked us to talk a wee bit more about how do we kind of move forward and think about doing what matters. And I think one of the biggest things that the pandemic has actually given us is that connection with a kind of realization and an understanding of what is actually important to us. You know, as a therapist and as a, you know, and in my friendship groups and in my family circles, there's been evidence of this real understanding of this kind of newer understanding in most of my everyday conversations, whether that be in the supermarket, in the doctor's surgery, in my therapy room. There is much more chat about what is really important to us. When we have these conversations, it's really highlighting what our values are. As therapists, we commonly talk about values. It's one of the things, you know, Catherine, Jo and I all talk about in our sessions. And we think of values as being our heart's desires. They're about what are truly important to us and what we actually stand for. We all have values, but we all don't share the same values. It's what makes us unique. One of the things that makes us uniquely human. Thinking about values, it's about how we want to be here in the present and also in the future. It's about how we want to treat ourselves, treat other people, and treat the world around us. And we, you know, as psychologists, I'm not going to lie, we bang on a lot about values. We just do. And why? Why do we do that? Because when we live a life that is congruent with our values, when we live a life that is meaningful, it lends itself to leading a more meaningful and full and rich life. And that's really important when you get pandemics and difficulties and stress and challenge thrown at you. So even in crisis, we can live a life that has got value and by doing more of what matters. Now, I don't know if people talk about values as much as I do, but I think it's a kind of, you know, it's what enriches our lives. And Jo is going to kind of talk us through a kind of metaphor of beef stew. She's going to now teach us about how to make a good beef stew to kind of try and demonstrate why values and thinking about values is important.
So bear with me because you're probably thinking, what on earth, beef stew? What are these people on about tonight? But it'll hopefully you'll understand when I do it. So this is a kind of metaphor for the importance of really tuning into your values, you know, really kind of flavouring your life with things that make it rich and interesting. And, you know, we've probably all naturally tuned into our values over lockdown, and I know that I was spending far more time just walking in nature because that's what was important and that's what enriched my life rather than sitting trying to do homeschool constantly, which was frankly kind of sometimes quite wearing. So, you know, it's about thinking, okay, what's going to actually enrich my life and how can I appreciate that? So if you imagine, and I'll apologise for anyone who's a vegetarian since I'm talking about beef stew, but if you are, just think of a cauliflower or something like that. Okay, so imagine you had some beef and you had a pot of boiling water. And you make a stew and you put the beef in the water and you boil it up for an hour and that's it. And then you have to eat it. Thumbs up or thumbs down if you think that's going to be a tasty meal. Yeah. I wouldn't want to eat that way. So imagine you had beef again, you had a pot of boiling water, but this time you add some potatoes and some onions, and maybe a carrot, and some nice beef kind of stock, some bay leaves, a bit of salt, a bit of sergeant pepper, and maybe a nice glug of wine. Imagine what that would be like if you boiled that up for an hour and you really let all the flavours simmer, and then you had it for your dinner later. Would that be thumbs up or thumbs down for a good beef stew? Yeah, I quite wish I had it in front of me now, quite hungry. So life can be a bit like that. We can have kind of beef stew, but sometimes it's a bit bland and we don't really notice it much, or we just kind of go through the motions of eating it and not thinking, actually, I can make this a bit more interesting. So if we add things, and all these ingredients are basically our values, and we don't have to, do anything huge to connect with our values. We can connect with them right away. So for example, if, your value is, compassion and care, but you couldn't go and see your family because of lockdown, what we've found is a lot of people actually then did that with their community. So they would speak to their neighbours, they would, check in on their kind of the elderly people who live nearby them, and they would buy them milk and so on. So that would be a way of being able to connect with them right away, even if we couldn't do the bigger stuff like go and visit relatives and so on. So often we talk about flavouring and savouring with our values, which can links to the beef stew. So if you think about how can I flavour my life with all these values? So there might be kind of love and compassion, kindness, adventure. You can think about how you can all put this into your life. But you're not just flavouring it. The important thing is to really savour it as well. So notice that your values are, featuring every day. Notice that you are helping somebody. Notice that you're, going on a day trip that's out with your council boundaries, so you're having a bit of an adventure. Really appreciate that and so on. So that can be a really helpful way just to kind of keep in mind of, okay, am I flavouring and savouring today, or am I having a bit of bland beef stew? And sometimes having that metaphor in your head can actually really help you remember these things. So hopefully that makes more sense now that I've explained it a bit.
So we weren't actually teaching you how to cook beef stew, because I don't know. I think I speak for us all, I'm not sure, but we're not the best cooks. So yeah, I maybe just speak for myself. So as I say, we talk as therapists about values all of the time, and we use a lot of different exercises to help people think about what their values are. So on the blog that accompanies the webinar and the vlogs, there's a couple of exercises. One of them's just very brief, and one of them's a kind of 20-minute exercise. The brief exercise we can think about just now. So I want you to think about that it's your 100th birthday. Okay, you've had your telegram from the king or queen, whoever it may be, at the point of your 100th birthday. But there's going to be a celebration. And there's going to be 3 or 4 people coming to that celebration who are going to stand up and give a speech about you. And when they're speaking about you, they're going to be speaking about what kind of person you are, what you stand for, and what you mean to them. I want you just to imagine what you would want to hear those people say. And think about the words that are coming into your mind. And when we do this exercise, when I talk to my friends about this even, the words that most often come into their mind are things like they were kind, or they are kind. They're loving, they're compassionate, they're caring, they're authentic, they're a genuine person. Who you see is who you get. They're an adventurer. They were up for it, they were up for pretty much anything. You might get they're artistic, or actually they were quick-witted. They're humorous. These are values. What we hear less in our conversations is about material things, or that they worked lots, that tends to be, you know, further down that list. They tend not to be values.
Nobody says, I wish I'd done more hours in the office.
No, nobody says that. So I guess, you know, think about what the words were that was coming into your mind as you thought about your 100th birthday celebration. And think about how you can flavour and savour those in your everyday life. Noticing where they're existing at the moment, and maybe noticing where you would want to move towards them a bit more and act them out a bit more, and think about how you might go about doing that. Because it's good knowing your values, but it's much, much better when we put them into action. So that's kind of the summary of kind of values-based living. Values-based living, we know as therapists, does help us cope with adversity. So as we come into this next part of the pandemic, connect with those values. We've been having those conversations all through this pandemic. Hold on to what we've learned and take that forward and think, what matters most to me? What areas of my life matter most to me? And how do I connect with those values in those areas?
I was just thinking as you were talking there, Jan, you know, the way things are going, some of us might still be working when we're at 110th birthday, might not be allowed to retire by then, but it is that thing that even if you're working, even if you were still working at 110, it's carving out what's important and adding that flavour, because we can just keep going and just keep going and just keep going. But actually, and you sometimes think, I don't have time to go to the cupboard and get some OXO, or I don't have time to I don't have a potato in my fridge. How am I meant to flavour my stew? You know, you might feel like you've not got the energy to go and add these extra ingredients. You might feel like you've only got the energy for the beef and the water. But actually, what you find is it's important to put the energy in to making the flavour, because when you have the flavour, it gives you more oomph, and then it gives you more energy. So it costs a bit and you have to galvanize yourself to do it when you don't feel like it, but then you reap the benefits.
Yep.
So I hope that that's been helpful, that introduction to doing more of what matters, you know, that values-based living. And so I'm going to hand over to Jo now, who's going to tell us about how and when to get help.
Thanks, Jan. So yeah, this was another area that you all voted on to hear a bit more about. Not surprisingly, because we get practically daily phone calls at the wellbeing rooms or individually from people, you know, looking for help and not knowing where to start. And I think it can be quite difficult to navigate a kind of system when you're not that familiar with it. But the important thing, first of all, to realise is that not everybody needs professional help necessarily. You know, there's been a lot of anxiety and trauma and loss and grief and so on from the pandemic, but no wonder, to be honest, you know, when you think of what we've faced, these reactions are actually perfectly understandable and perfectly normal. And what we try not to do is kind of almost like pathologise and say, oh yes, something's wrong with you, you need to go and speak about this because you're feeling anxious or because you're grieving somebody who you lost through the pandemic. Of course you will be feeling a bit anxious, of course you could be experiencing loss. So I think that's important to recognise, and as Catherine was saying earlier, being kind and compassionate to yourself when you can see that things are a bit of a struggle at times. Often we find through talking to family and friends actually can really help. So we talk about our kind of natural support systems. So that's like people around about you. And, you know, there's a kind of, you know, problem shared is a problem halved phrase, which is actually true a lot of the time. So often between that and kind of things just settling with time can be helpful for a lot of people. Sometimes though, things might continue to be tricky. And a lot of people who contact us are at the point where it's really significantly impacting on their life. And that's the key that we always look for. What's the impact this is having to you? Because there can be, you know, lots of traumatic things that happen, but sometimes you can kind of, you know, get your head around that eventually and kind of accommodate that into your life and process it and kind of start to move forward. Other times, you know, it can be a real kind of difficulty and it can impact you. What we mean by impact is things like noticing that, you know, your emotions and anxiety, for example, are perhaps far more than usual, that, you know, it's there every day, that it's impacting on your daily functioning. So things like your sleep's gone awry, you're maybe kind of drinking more than you used to, your appetite might have gone, you know, all of these kind of things. Your relationships might be affected, you know, you might be arguing a lot more, you might be withdrawing from people, work and school might be affected. You know, as we're seeing earlier, lots of children are kind of being affected by just all the changes. So sometimes that can be, you know, start to impact on how they behave and so on and how they're feeling. So the impact's really important to look at. So if you're noticing things getting a bit worse, what can you then do? So there's lots of self-help actually online, which is great. And I think we've put some links on our blog, and we often post up links on our website as well, just for kind of recommended websites, because yeah, there are some that are great and some maybe not so great. So there's a lot of websites that you can look at to get some helpful information, and it can guide yourself through that. If things still feel a bit tricky after that, what we then say is, well, it's probably good to go to your GP, because often if you want a referral in NHS to a service, you would kind of have to go through your GP, because they often don't take self-referrals. So GPs usually have a kind of, you know, idea of what's in your local area if you wanted to be referred to a local kind of service. And there's various types of services depending on, you know, how you're feeling and what the nature of the difficulty is. So that's the public sector. Then we've also got the private sector, and that's therapists who work, you know, for example, at the Wellbeing rooms, all the practitioners who work there do that privately. Some people choose to do that because they might want to be seen a bit sooner. Unfortunately, an impact of the pandemic is that, you know, there's a huge amount of pressure in the NHS. So, you know, we can hopefully help out with that by seeing people. There's also the third sector organisations, so it's things like community organisations. It's also known as the voluntary sector. So you get like lots of help with various things like housing, employment, befriending, counselling, all that sort of stuff. Also schools nowadays are really good actually with having school support. So for young people, there's often, you know, a counselling service at school or kind of pastoral care that they can link into. So, you know, if you're concerned about a child, perhaps, you know, you could encourage them to link in with that. Lots of workplaces also have support systems in place, and we see people through that route as well. So they're the kind of main areas, I guess. There's a blog that we wrote about this, which kind of expands into it a lot more. But hopefully that helps you kind of understand where to start, because as I said, it's very common where people are like, oh, I don't even know where to start, or, you know, who do I contact? At the Wellbeing rooms as well, we've got different types of professionals who work there. I could see one in the audience tonight. So we've got a whole load of different professions. So we've got clinical psychology, CBT therapy, counselling, we've got speech and language therapy, we've got specialist autism assessments. I missed anything, guys?
Counselling psychologist.
Counselling psychologist, yeah.
Psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Psychotherapy, yeah. So, and we've got a blog as well to explain all this, because it's so tricky to understand who does what and why they're all different, and, you know, so that can be a bit of another minefield. So yeah, there's a blog on our website that explains all of that. So, and I think we've got about 19 people who work here, so that can be great for people who can then have a choice of who they want to see as well. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea. Sorry,
Jo, I was just going to jump in and say, and I suppose, and it's not just for, you know, anyone wanting to come to the Wellbeing rooms, but actually just even to get that idea of what is this, what is psychology, what is a clinical psychologist, what is a counsellor. You know, the blogs are there just for information, because one of our values, one of the things that matters to us is about sharing this information, because we recognise that it's really challenging. and we want to really help people to be able to get access when they're looking for it. And it is such a quagmire. So we're trying to kind of be a one-stop shop of information, really, as well, to try and help with that.
And there's different kind of directories you can look online for, you know, depending where you live as well. So all that information's on our blogs too.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully that's a bit of a kind of outline of how to get help and when to get help. So I think it's 10 to 9. How did that happen?
No,
I think it's we're just going to kind of Catherine's going to kind of wind things up now and then go to a Q&A.
Yep, definitely. So really just kind of thinking about all of these different things that we've talked about. It's been such a tough year, over a year now, that we've all been experiencing, and for so many of us in so many different ways. So we've all got these kind of, you know, different stories, but sort of a shared experience of feelings that have come up within us. Might all have had different ones at different times and about different things, but common human experience of anxiety, worry, sadness, loss, all of these things. So we're kind of hoping that tonight is that opportunity to hear a wee bit about some of the information that might be helpful for some of that, and that you can take that forward from tonight in terms of coping with things that we can't control and worrying about things, what to do about that, but also that focus on doing what matters, doing more of that, and also about how to access help when and if you need it. But you know, I won't do all our thank yous just quite yet, because we've got to do our Q's and A's, but we are very grateful to you all for coming because it's just it's really nice to know that, you know, it's something that the community has wanted. And also we're really grateful to the team at the Bearsden Festival, to everyone who's supported us to kind of put this together. But I mean, I think probably if we go to questions now, that might be a good idea while we've got time left. So there's been a few questions come in which have been really, it's great. Thank you so much for submitting them. The first one is around, so I'll read it out. So one of my biggest worries is around going back to normal. And you know, I've got really used to the peace and quiet. I really don't want to go back to the noise and the chaos of people's expectations of what I should do. And that's such a good point. So this person's asking for tips on that. So yeah, what do we think, Jan and Joe?
I would say give yourself permission to take things at your own pace. You know, I think there is that huge pressure. I'm feeling it myself. You know, you're seeing kind of all these things on social media. Everybody's out doing stuff and you're thinking, I don't know if I want to do that necessarily quite yet. So I think recognize that there's that pressure there, and give yourself permission that you don't need to get back out there right away. You can take your time with things. You know, we often work in a very graded way with people when they've got kind of anxieties about things. So, you know, rather than chucking you in the deep end, you know, you might kind of go out with one friend, you know, to a quiet place, like I don't know, a cafe at a quieter time, and then kind of gradually build that up so you kind of get used to being back out there again. So that can often be a kind of helpful way to approach it rather than feeling the pressure that you've got to do it right now.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that really strikes me is it comes back to values and doing what matters. So actually identifying what's important to you. I mean, the pandemic's actually quite a good chance for regrowth, because it stripped away everything that maybe we felt we had to do and that we should do. And it's a really good opportunity now to build up again from the roots and think, well, what's important to me? What do I want, as Jan was saying earlier, to be the thing at my 110th birthday that I'm reflecting on? What kind of things can I maybe pare down? What kind of things do I want to do more of?
Yeah, I would just echo the same, the kind of same point about connecting with your values, but also acknowledging there may be external pressures to go back into that busy life. If you are, you know, being pulled back into an office, or, you know, that's the direction of travel for your work, that might be something. And, you know, quite often in therapy we talk about competing values, you know, when, you know, it is difficult to offset that. So it's maybe then thinking about, you know, what works best for you, whilst you know, kind of living a life that's rich and full and meaningful for you, and not to be afraid of trying to pare back. You know, I think pandemic was an opportunity to reset for many of us,
Yeah.
you know, and not to feel that pressure.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
thinking about what do you want to keep, you know, from the
Yeah.
pandemic. So people who are going out for far more walks in the countryside or nature, or spending more quality time with their children and so on. You know, if you want to keep those kind of things, then that's great. And again, that links into values as well. So hopefully that's helped give you a few tips.
And I suppose people might think, but how am I meant to do that? It's all very well saying that, oh yeah, connect with your values and just do more of that. But sometimes it can feel really difficult to do that in real life. And there's no denying that. There is something there about, I suppose, developing a sense of value of yourself and recognizing that your own time is worth, you know, it's that whole metaphor about if you're on a plane and you need the oxygen, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first in order that you can help anybody else. Actually, sometimes it's really important to recognize your own value and to be kind of assertive in making sure you reach your own needs, you meet your own needs. Okay. Sorry, Jan, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that maybe takes us into the next question. Which again, it's a really good question. How do you know where to draw the line in terms of being kind to ourselves? Should we keep pushing to eat healthily, exercise, and improve? You know, that ever that self-improvement, or should we just slob around in the sofa and binge Netflix? I find it hard to work out when self-care turns into actually not caring for yourself very much at all.
That's such a good point, isn't it? Because actually self-care, when you think self-care, you think light a scented candle, have a bath, eat some chocolate. But actually sometimes self-care is tidying the living room. Sometimes self-care is making sure you've been to the shops and bought food. That is not very lovely, but it's self-care because you need these things to be in place in order to feel okay. And when it gets to the point where actually you've maybe not showered for a week and you're not eating healthily because you've not got food in, you know, you're just getting takeaways every night, then it tips over into maybe feeling, you can do that for a week maybe even, but there comes a point when all of us can recognize that maybe that actually becomes unhelpful. And it's about kind of recognizing that. And I suppose it's one of the things that we often talk about is, does it serve you? Does it help you? Is it helpful? If it's not helpful, maybe try to do less of that, maybe try to have the change. So it's recognizing that point for you, because sure, I love sitting on the couch watching Netflix with a big massive tub of Ben & Jerry's and a tube of Pringles. That's the dream for me. But also, exactly. But if I did that all the time, actually that becomes that's going to have a negative effect for me. So it is trying to kind of monitor that, and monitoring that can be tricky.
I think also as well, what maybe here and there is a bit of a kind of what we call all or nothing thinking. I've got to do all of this, I've got to do every single bit of self-care, I've got to work out and, you know, go to the gym and sleep well and eat well, or I do nothing, I slob about and eat rubbish all day. So, and we find that a lot of the times people, you know, it's kind of very all or nothing behaviour. So what we often encourage is a kind of recognition of that and think, well, what would a kind of middle ground look like? Yeah. And it's okay, as Catherine's saying, to slob about. I certainly do that on a lot of nights, you know, just sit and watch a good old Netflix episode or whatever. I'm sure everybody does that. And it's about knowing that that's completely normal and needed a lot of the time as well. And it's okay, you know, to be kind to yourself. And, you know, we do lots of different types of therapies, and it's kind of putting one in my head there when we talk about different systems we go into. So sometimes we're on threat mode all the time, where we see everything as threatening. And then we switch to drive mode all the time. I've got to achieve. And the mode that we kind of forget about a lot of the time is the kind of self-soothing, compassionate mode. And then we try and encourage people to get a bit more of a balance between those systems. So I think it's okay, you know, if you have some nights where you're just slobbing out. And in fact, I'd maybe use some different words around that, because sometimes, you know, the words we use can make us feel worse. So if you use the word slob, then you might feel a bit more like that. But just say I'm chilling out, you know, that might feel a bit kinder. So it's just playing about with, you know, how you might describe it and the middle ground, and giving yourself permission. It's okay to do that every now and then.
I think the key thing that came to me there was, is it working for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
That workability question that we come back to a lot in therapy, you know, is it serving you? Is it, you know, kind of taking you in the direction? Is it taking you in the direction of your values? Is it congruent with your, you know, with where you kind of want to, you know, how you want to be as a person? But is it working for you? But yeah, don't underestimate the quality of good Ben and Jerry's now.
Other ice cream brands are available. I'm really aware of time, and I'm aware that we're kind of running out of time, but some great questions coming in. So I think if we kind of try and very quickly have a look at some of the themes and pick them out. So there's stuff in the questions around creating healthy boundaries at home when working from home, and how that can be challenging and how to do that. There's also questions about the values and how it's been easier to live by these values, perhaps having been away from opinions of others. I suppose that's touching on what we said earlier on already about, you know, how we can tune out that noise of other people, actually, by maybe creating a buffer yourself, I suppose, and trying to kind of be assertive and put your own oxygen mask on first, and recognizing that it's important to do that. And so the example given there is about not wanting to turn down an invitation because you don't want to offend others. During like lockdown, we've not had to say no. Absolutely. And I think that's very much what I was saying earlier on about that need to actually assert ourselves sometimes. And again, I guess that ties in a little bit with this thing about working from home as well. We kind of maybe need to assert ourselves with ourselves a lot, whether it's turning down an invitation, or whether it's making sure that we get up from our desk and going for a walk at lunchtime, so that we are breaking up that monotony and making a change. So maybe wearing a different outfit, you know, even though you're at work, you take off a cardigan and that's you at home. Be in a different room if you can. So it's almost the theme there of asserting ourselves no matter what the domain, and recognizing the needs that we have, and then actually allowing ourselves to be of value enough to do the things that are going to help us to do that. I'm so aware of the time, and I just really wanted to, well, Jan, you were going to come in there, sorry.
We pick up on a question there that's about what would make me feel better right now.
Right.
Somebody's asked that, and I just wonder about, you know, if it feels like right now, I would kind of notice and name. You know, I would notice the feelings I have and think about putting names to those, and then kind of just recognizing in myself what our feelings are, and then thinking about, you know, how is this impacting for us, and then what can I do? How do I move towards where I want to be? You know, that may be less anxious, it may be less sad. How do I kind of move towards that? And, you know, we would talk about living a value congruent life, but if it's something that you're really struggling with, you know, always know the avenues to get help, I think is really important. Like Jo spoke about, you know, if it's really impacting on your life and you feel the feelings are really impacting on your life, go get help. Go speak to your GP, speak to someone, notice the feelings and express them. It's really important.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And thank you to everybody for expressing your feelings and thoughts and questions in the chat, and for coming along. We're really glad to be able to do it, and we're delighted that you've come. And as we said already, there's loads of information on the website, on the blogs. So please do feel free to kind of follow up with information of that from there. But also if you're needing extra help, as Jan was just saying, you know, hopefully where to go to get it. And a massive thank you to the team at the Bearsden Festival for all your help getting us tech unsavvy people to be able to do this, and also to all of you for coming, and to the community for supporting the event. Jan and Jo, do you have anything else to add?
I was just going to say that this week has been a real kind of test for us, living by our values, because we don't tend to do webinars. This is my first webinar ever. I think Jan and Catherine have done them before. But we were thinking, well, this is really important to us personally, that we want to be able to share this information. So we will tolerate the uncertainty of how it's going to go, and, you know, all of the emotions that it brought up. And actually, you know, it's made me feel like I have connected with them tonight and tasting that beef stew.
Yeah.
Thanks very much to all of you for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to say that for the last 2 weeks I've been calling vlogs wee videos. I didn't know what a vlog was. This week has enlightened me, so it took me way out of my comfort zone. I now know how to vlog. So yeah, thank you for coming. It's been really nice hosting. It's really nice talking to you all this evening.
Thank you so much, Jo, Jan and Catherine. That has been absolutely brilliant tonight. I'm getting texts in from people saying how helpful it's been and how normal you are. So congratulations. It really has been absolutely fantastic. And there's chat coming in as well. You can see that it's made a big impact tonight. So thank you. And we'll have that up on the website so that people can look back. I know a few people couldn't make it tonight, so they'll be encouraged to look at it tomorrow. So many insights, so many memorable little flags that we can keep in our heads and come back to. So thank you for that. Thank you, Sam, for your technical support, and Fiona for your presentation support to prepare for this. We're going to send out a really short survey. It'll come into your inbox in 5 minutes if you register for the event. So please just send it back, and we'll capture the chat as well. And it's really useful to get that kind of feedback. This week our programme continues. We've got Operation Play Outdoors for preschoolers and primary kids on Saturday. Really important to get the kids back out playing, and we really hope that we'll fill up all the spaces that we've got for that. The weather's looking okay. And on Sunday we announce the winners of the Green Shoots photo contest. If you were in right at the start, you would have seen some of the images coming in, and we've had over 600 votes coming for the competition so far. So it's really kind of captured the imaginations, and some of the images do stay with you. It's been great. So visit the website, visit the Wellbeing Room's website as well. They've got some great content as well. And like us both on social media. We're at Bearsden Fest and they're at the Wellbeing Rooms. So thank you everybody for coming along tonight, and really take care. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.